Imagine an Australian Defence Force with a full brigade of mechanised infantry equipped with the latest infantry fighting vehicles, a fleet of B-21 Raider stealth bombers, our northern bases protected by modern missile defence systems, and our own military satellite communications network. It seems a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? Well, all this and more would be possible if Australia increased its defence spending in line with what the US government has recently asked us to do. Today, we're going to discuss the merits of a big defence spending increase for Australia, why it might be necessary, and what it would mean for our military capabilities. I'm Pikos, and today, we're talking tactics. On the 2nd of June 2025, US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth called on Australia to lift its spending from its current level of 2% of GDP to 3.5% as soon as possible. This would equate to an increase of about 40 billion Australian dollars a year. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese immediately rejected this call.
What we'll do is we'll determine our defence policy, and we've invested just across the forwards an additional $10 billion in defence.
He stated that Australia is increasing its defence spending to 2.33% over the next 8 years. But is that fairly small increase enough? No one likes other countries telling Australia what to do, but in this case, does the US government have a point? Why we need to increase defence spending. As I've mentioned in many previous videos, Australia is moving into more dangerous geopolitical times. Tensions in our region mean that the government needs to get serious about defence spending, and quickly. Pete Hegseth and the Trump administration in general are divisive. I do get it. But it's not just the US calling for an increase in defence spending. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global defence spending increased by almost 10% in 2024, which is the biggest rise since the end of the Cold War. Just after Defence Secretary Hegseth's comments about Australia, UK Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that the UK would increase its defence spending from its current level of 2.3% of GDP to 2.5% by 2027 and 3% in the longer term.
Things have changed. In the world of today, the front line, if you like, is here. The threat we now face is more serious, more immediate, and more unpredictable than at any time since the Cold War.
Now, the UK is arguably in a much better strategic position than Australia. Its main adversary, Russia, is far weaker than China, and all of allied Europe lies between Russia and the UK. Yet the centre-left Starmer government still feels the need to raise defence spending to 2.5% over the next couple of years, expanding its fleet of nuclear submarines, replacing nuclear warheads, building new munitions plants, and launching new communications systems. As I discussed in my last video, check it out up here, Australia has to deal with an increasingly aggressive and muscular China threatening to annex its neighbour, undertaking the biggest naval build-up since World War II and expanding its influence into our immediate region. With all this in mind, it seems like a no-brainer that Australia needs to increase its defence spending, and fast. So what could we spend this cash on? What an increased defence budget could buy. Increasing our defence spending to 3.5% of GDP would be expanding Australia's defence budget by about $40 billion a year and would open up a variety of different strategic capabilities. Currently, Australian defence projects are mostly paid for by robbing Peter to pay Paul. For every exciting announcement like AUKUS and the Long Range Fires program, we've also become as used to quiet announcements of defence programs being reduced, delayed, or cancelled. Significantly expanding defence spending would allow the ADF to acquire these much needed new capabilities without needing to reduce, delay, or cancel other projects. To give you an idea of the scale of difference an extra $40 billion a year would make, just 1 year of this extra funding would be enough to fund all the cut and reduced programs we recently covered in our video on this topic. You can find it here again. But instead of just rehashing what we've already talked about previously, let's look at what new capabilities the ADF could invest in if we had such a significant ongoing increase in funding. These capabilities assume that the main priorities of an enhanced ADF would be to increase deterrence of aggressive action towards Australia, support our allies in the region in a meaningful way, and also to be able to project power into the Indo-Pacific region if needed. Improved long-range strike capabilities. Long-range strike capabilities provide a deterrent to aggression by holding enemy assets in danger when they enter our region. Additional funding would allow us to significantly increase our long-range strike capacity. The gold standard of long-range strike platforms would have to be the B-21 Raider stealth bomber. We previously covered the video of Australia acquiring these absolute beasts, which are capable of penetrating the latest anti-air defences and destroying targets far into enemy territory. Having a squadron of these would be Australia's most potent weapons until our nuclear submarines arrive. And unlike the US's shipbuilding capability, their aircraft manufacturing hasn't been adversely impacted, meaning that we can get the B-21 Raider quicker to stop the capability gap we're currently presented with in Australia. Other long-range strike upgrades include expanding our existing systems, such as the MQ-28 Ghost Bat, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and precision strike missiles. We could also explore options for acquiring hypersonic weapons. Faster nuclear submarines. Australia's main planned deterrent against Chinese aggression to our north will be the nuclear-powered submarines to be delivered under the AUKUS program. However, the first of the Virginia-class nuclear submarines isn't scheduled to reach Australia until the early 2030s. With additional funding, Australia could likely bring forward the acquisition of US Virginia-class submarines and then AUKUS submarines themselves. We also could invest in further submarine basing infrastructure, such as improving the HMAS Sterling expansion. Littoral and logistics vessels. A key part of Australia's ability to project power into our region is our ability to undertake amphibious operations in the islands to our north. While we are currently heavily investing in developing our capabilities in this area, much more could be done. The most important of these would be to restore the building of the joint support ships. These were to be two multi-purpose auxiliary ships capable of both sea lift and replenishment operations, and they would have significantly expanded the Navy's support capabilities. However, these ships were cancelled in 2024, leaving the Navy with only the two supply class replenishment ships and significantly less sea lift capability. The Navy desperately needs more logistics and sea lift capabilities, and so building the joint support ships would be a critical part of that. A new second element in supporting our amphibious operations would be missile-armed patrol boats suited to operating in our northern littoral. These ships would provide a force that is quickly deployable, highly agile, and a deterrent to forces attempting to operate in Australia's northern approaches or disrupting our amphibious operations. Air superiority. Having the ability to establish air superiority across northern Australia and into the Indo-Pacific is vital for our national security. Increasing defence spending would allow us to expand the F-35A fleet, currently capped at 72, and potentially consider F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing variants for deployment on our Canberra-class landing helicopter dock ships. We did a whole video on what options expanding expanding the F-35 fleet would give us. So you should also check that one out too. Quite a few videos for you to check out now. The RAF would also be able to acquire additional support aircraft like KC-30A air-to-air refuelers, which would enhance our ability to conduct long-range strike and air patrols and ultimately to project air power across the Pacific. Missile defence and integrated air defence. Australia's northern bases like Darwin, Tyndall, Townsville, and even Amberley are hopelessly exposed to strikes. In a worst-case scenario, if China were to launch even non-nuclear ballistic missiles, we may not have enough warning time to scramble jets for interception. A sneak attack using slower moving cruise missiles or drone swarms launched from closer range could catch us completely off guard. At this stage, we'd be sitting ducks, and that is simply unacceptable. With increased funding, Australia could invest in a layered, permanent air and missile defence network, including options like Aegis Ashore, to protect our vital northern military infrastructure. This would be a game changer, and if we were to adopt such a network, we might even borrow a page from the Israeli Iron Dome and the Americans' Golden Dome, and even call ours the Green and Gold Dome. But it's not just fixed bases that need protection. Another glaring weakness in our military is the lack of close in-air defence systems for our deployed troops and vehicles. Without protection, they're easy pickings for drones and loitering munitions. One excellent solution would be the Sky Ranger 30 turret by Rheinmetall. This modular air defence system is already in service with Germany and soon will be with Denmark, the Netherlands, and Austria. Other countries like the US, Italy, and Hungary have expressed strong interest. The real kicker? It could be mounted directly onto our existing Boxer combat reconnaissance vehicle fleet, which was specifically designed for modular adaptability. The Sky Ranger turret can be installed and be operational within an hour, giving the ADF a plug-and-play air defence capability with a 30mm airburst cannon, 4 short-range anti-air missiles, integrated radar and tracking sensors designed for drone and missile interception. And it's not just a theoretical capability. Rheinmetall already has a facility in Queensland, meaning we could build these locally if we acquire the production rights. If we're serious about protecting our forces, both static and mobile, then integrated and close in-air defence must be a top priority in any serious uplift of Australia's defence capabilities. Cyber and space capabilities. Cyber and space capabilities are an emerging but critical area that Australia is falling behind on. To ensure we stay up to date in these areas with increased funding, we could restore funding to our military satellite communications system, which would have given us a secure and sovereign communications network for our air, ground, and sea forces across the Indo-Pacific. We could also expand this system to incorporate surveillance capabilities. We could and should also boost our offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. Autonomous and uncrewed systems. As we've covered in a previous video, Australia is getting pretty good at designing and manufacturing a wide variety of drones, but we can always do more. More funding means we could deploy a greater number and wider range of autonomous underwater vehicles, uncrewed surface vessels, and unmanned combat air vehicles. We could also develop drone swarms. These platforms provide us with the ability to provide a cost-effective presence in contested zones with less risk to ADF personnel. Supporting infrastructure. Last but certainly not least, with additional funding, we could greatly improve the supporting infrastructure the ADF needs to function during a conflict. This should include expanding and hardening forward operating bases in Northern Australia, RAF Tyndall, Darwin and Townsville, enhancing our local fuel reserves, establishing logistics hubs and expanding our sovereign manufacturing capabilities, especially for munitions and shipbuilding. Local manufacturing might not be sexy, but it's one of the most important factors in the ADF being able to stay in the fight in a major conflict. We should take notice that the UK is planning to use much of its defence spending uplift on building 6 new munitions plants. We should follow their example and do something similar. From defence to regional power projection. At 3.5% of GDP, Australia could transition from a defensive posture to a regional power projection role, capable of rapidly deploying forces across the Indo-Pacific, denying adversaries regional access to our northern approaches, and supporting allies in contested theatres like Taiwan or the South China Sea. Regardless of who is calling for this increase, I think it's vital for Australia's future that we immediately increase Australia's defence budget and start investing in the capabilities we've talked about today. We should be doing it for our men and women in service to our country by giving them the best possible technology to help defend our country. But I'm interested to know what you think about Australia increasing its defence spending. Anthony Albanese has already come out and quashed the idea and said we're spending enough. Do you think that more is necessary? Maybe you think we should be increasing spending by even more than 3.5% of GDP. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell to be the first to see my new videos. But that's it for today. My name's Mel Pikos, and we've been talking tactics.